Hey everyone, welcome to the Vintage Ballers podcast. I'm your host, Brad Coreno, and on today's episode, we have Chris Copeland joining the show. Chris played basketball at the University of Colorado, and then he played in the D League and overseas for many years before making it to the NBA in 2012, where he played 4 years for the Knicks, Pacers, and Bucks. So without further ado, please welcome Chris Copeland. So, Chris, I want to take it back to your youth, actually. I know you grew up in New Jersey, or born in New Jersey. Take us back, like, who are your influences basketball-wise back then, favorite teams, favorite players, and when did you really get into basketball?
My biggest influence, my brother, number one. He passed when I was young, but he's my number one influence in basketball without in life. But him and my mother. But I always wanted to be like him growing up. If you want to talk about like NBA names, I would say I loved Penny growing up, and I loved T-Mac. Obviously everybody respected Mike, but I was of the age of like, when Penny was doing his thing, I was watching, everybody loved Iverson and T-Mac. Those are probably my favorite guys.
Yeah, I grew up a huge Magic. I was a big Rockets guy back then too. I grew up in Cleveland, so Cavs were always my favorite team. And that was like the Price, Doherty era, and Larry Nance, those guys, Elo, and then of course Jordan ruined all that. And then MJ ruined a lot of people's favorite team.
He ruined a lot.
But that Magic team, I'm 40, so like that era for me, that Charlotte team with LJ, Muggsy, Alonzo, and then that Magic team with Penny and Shaq and 3D and all those guys, and then of course the Sonics with Kemp and Payton, and that whole era was so much fun to watch, and Akeem and all that. That was just that Penny Shaq team. I think I had actually Marquise Daniels in the podcast, and Marquise grew up in Orlando, and he was like, and that was his favorite team. He used to watch him practice and everything back in the day, so he was like. I think everyone wonders what could have happened if Penny stayed healthy and Shaq would have stayed in Orlando. Because, they had a heck of a team.
Yeah, agreed. That would have been something special. Shaq is obviously the most dominant big man of all time. You put that with Penny, the way he was playing, like if they could have stayed together, stayed healthy, like that'd have been scary. You could have been maybe their own version of Kobe and Shaq.
I totally agree. And I brought that up to some people before, especially some of the younger kids, and they get kind of offended. Like, Kobe, no one could be better than Kobe and Shaq. And I'm not saying that. But they don't understand how good Penny was. They didn't see Penny play. I'm like, Penny was a different. He's a different cat for a point guard. He was, probably a little smaller than Magic, obviously about 6'7", but he played a lot like Magic, and he also could score, put up 25 or 30. And he was, he could
probably
shoot
more
better.
Might be a little more explosive than Magic.
Yes,
getting off the ground. And then again, you add Shaq to that dynamic. Magic obviously had a bunch of pieces, Kareem, and we go down the list, but Shaq was Shaq.
Yeah, Shaq in his prime, like you ain't stop. I remember the Blazers that way was a Sabonis with 7'2", 7'3", had Sheed, you had Brian Grant, all those guys, and they couldn't stop him. That's how dominant Shaq was. Facts. Those are some big boys going against him, and they were just dominant. So,
I've seen Kenyon talk about I think he's on Gilbert's podcast. The picture to me is the most iconic picture in NBA history, and for me.
Aaron Williams, all those guys hanging out.
They pulling on him. Guy like screaming, like his face was like. You remember that picture part? Yeah. I think it's the best picture in NBA basketball history. And Kenyon Martin was talking about how many people was just surrounding Shaq. One guy's like pulling his jersey. Kenyon's over there. Like that's just what he was. Like Shaq was just unbelievable.
So Aaron Williams follows my 90s page, and I've talked to him about that before, and it's hilarious. That picture is definitely iconic. And again, the younger kids, my nephews never got to see Shaq in his prime. They know he was dominant, but I'm like, you guys don't really know unless you saw him in his prime live, because tearing down hoops in the beginning, and we never saw anything like that before. We had Daryl Dawkins and Moses and some of the bigger guys in the past, but nobody like Shaq, who was that big, that dominant, and he was quick on his feet. For a 7'1", 320-pound monster, he could run. That's scary. And then one of my brothers was an NBA ref back in the 90s and early 2000s, and he told my brother, he goes, Shaq was closer to 370, 380, he thinks, than 320. He thinks in his prime. He said he was a huge monster. And I just don't know how I remember watching Rick Smits and the Davis brothers, Antonio and Dale, and those are some big boys. Dale and Antonio were two tough guys. They couldn't handle him. They had no chance against you.
They fought hard.
They fought hard. And then
Shaq was Shaq.
Shaq was Shaq. And then you got a young Kobe, and you got all the other people. They were tough. Absolutely. But I wanted to get your high school days. I know that I think you went to high school in Maryland, correct? And I believe I read a story where you weren't going to go there, and you met some coaches from there, and they kind of recruited you to go there. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah, Colorado, in particular, or
High
high
school, high school.
school. Okay. Yeah, high school was interesting. So I actually was playing street ball. And a guy who played on the team saw me play and told his coach, and I was just there, like actually visiting my uncle. And the park, I just found a random park, and that became my high school. Long story short, one of the kids that played on the team told the coach. The coach was there, like he came out of the school, and he watched me play a couple games and was like, no, hey, we need to try to figure out, where you're staying, because we were still in flux and we were moving, trying to figure out where we're gonna be. And he was like, oh, let's look in this area. This will be a good school for you. And so shout out to Coach Coulter, actually, my guy to this day. That's how that
And,
went.
and what did you learn in high school that prepared you for college before we get to your Colorado days? What did you learn, and when did you realize that you could play major college basketball?
Work ethic for me, I think was I really had to. I started just and going to Virginia was where I got exposed to a lot of pros. I'm around Corey Alexander. I'm around Ben Wallace. I'm around a bunch of guys that are professionals. The high school landscape was pretty special. I played with Amari Stoudemire and one of
Really?
the that tournament out there. I got to see how far I was from being ready. And David Boyden, he's a coach for the Richmond Spiders right now. He was a former Hermitage guy, and he used to tell me, the type of workouts I needed to be doing, getting up. And I started waking up at 6 in the morning before high school, putting a bunch of work before school started. Um, and for me, that was key to get ready for college and trying to. My goal was always the league. Um, but I had to put that time in, and I didn't know how far I was. So high school was important for me because I just got to see how much talent there was out there, and for me to be able to compete, I had to put in a lot of work.
And when it came to Colorado and Coach Patton, how did that all work out? When did you, do you want to go there, or they recruit you, or how did that work out?
Yeah, they recruited me. I think I got noticed. They used to call this tournament out in Vegas the Big Time back in the day, and there was a bunch of talent there. I think they found me out of there. That's when the conversations got more and more serious. My mom, I'm a big time mama's boy. My mom was a big fan of the school and the program, and um, she was insistent. I kind of was leaning towards like Virginia Tech and staying local. I had a bunch of guys over there, or even Richmond. That's when Beeline was coaching, but yeah, it ended up going to Colorado, and it was a great 4 years.
So I want to give a shout out to one of my friends, aunts. Her name is Ann, and she was a point guard for Colorado women's team back in I think the early '90s, and they went to the tournament. They're really good, late
The
'80s,
last
early
name?
'90s. Annan, I don't know what her maiden name was. I'll have to,
Go
I'll have to,
Buffs, go Buffs to her. Yeah.
yeah, I'll tell you, she'll love this interview. She would love this. So I can't wait till she watches it. But yeah, she's a huge Buffs fan. But she was their point guard for I think it was the early '90s, and they went to the tournament. I know multiple times because she was telling me the people she played against. But yeah, she's a diehard Buffs. She'll know exactly who you are. So it's pretty cool to have you on the show. And I know obviously you got Chauncey and some of the other guys back in that era. I think David Harrison
Yep.
was that Roby there, and guys like I remember some of those teams early 2000s. I think you made the tournament the one year. I believe would have been
My,
your
my freshman year.
yeah, yep, I remember that. So you guys had some players, and what was that like making the tournament your freshman year, especially? Like it had to be incredible.
Again, these are all experiences that, like, for me, it let me see the work that had to be done. When you get to the tourney, you get to see how much talent there is, and you watching and you competing against guys that end up in the NBA, and like and there are levels, and I wasn't like a starter or nothing like that. You know what I mean? Barely saw the floor that year. I got to see some minutes here and there, but for me, the biggest thing was like, all right, I'm not here. I'm in the tournament, but like I don't I got to figure out how to do this. You know what I mean? And how to become a player and become somebody that will get recognition through this game. And for me, I was just there, young, learning and watching and soaking it up.
Now, what did Coach Patton instill in you?
Um, he gave me a lot of good life lessons. I'll give him that. He and I didn't or don't have the best relationship, but I do respect a lot of the life lessons that he gave us as a team. And I'll leave it there.
And going into the draft, I know you're undrafted. Did you expect to be drafted? And what was that like going through that process? I know it's got to hurt not to be drafted.
Exactly. I didn't expect it. You're always hopeful in the back of your mind,
Yep.
but for me, I knew I wasn't, a big name guy. I knew I was gonna have to figure it out through mini camps or try to get in the vet camp or going the overseas route, which I ended up taking. But I ended up breaking my foot, and that changed that made things even more difficult.
I didn't realize that. That's
Yeah,
okay. So, because I've had many guys in this podcast who played in the NBA who went overseas first, or even in the middle of the career went overseas and then came back, and they all talk about the game, how different it was in a good way, and how it really prepared them to come back. I had a guy that played against Manu back in the late '90s, before he came over, and guys like that. So he said the talent over there was kind of you could see it budding back then, but I don't think anybody realized what was going to be like today with Jokic and all the guys, Luka and all these guys today. But you saw that. I mean, you were kind of you're in the era where that was all kind of starting to happen. So when you played overseas, give us, tell us where you played number one and what was, what did you learn basketball wise first that prepared you for the NBA eventually?
Well, my pre NBA role was 1 year in the D League at the time, and then Spain got cut twice the same season. Went to Holland, then Germany for 2 years, then Belgium for 2 years.
And what was it like living in those countries?
It was amazing, man. Honestly, I have a lot of friends that I still talk to this day, that live over there. For me, the bonds that I built with some of the American imported players, again, are friends to this day. Um, and being able to live in another world like was just an awesome experience, man. I got to live in Barcelona. I got to live in Germany, in Holland, not too far from Amsterdam. I got to see all over Europe, and some of those teams we played, we went to China and stuff like that. So I got to see a lot, and at a young age, I got to travel the globe. That was a pretty dope experience.
And I mean, when I look at that, Chris, like I think you had an experience that even most of the guys in the NBA will never experience as far as living in those countries and playing in the NBA later on. So you got to
Sure.
experience both worlds. That's pretty amazing. And I think, like you said, all the friends you make all around the world, you probably learn different cultures and how to communicate in different ways and all that kind of. I mean, that's a big deal later in life. And I feel like even the NBA players who never experienced that, yes, they get to travel around the U.S. and do their thing here, but a lot of those guys will never experience that. So you got to experience something unique, not only playing in the NBA, which so few people will ever get to experience, but then also playing overseas. So I think it's a pretty awesome blend that you got to, experience back in those days.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, like, of course, coming out of college, you want to play in the league. Like, you want to just go to the league and have a long career. But I'm so thankful that I had the opportunities that I had to go overseas. Some of those moments for me, I wouldn't. I wish. I'm glad I didn't go to the NBA for some of those times that I had teammates, I had experiences I got to have. I'm really fortunate and blessed to be able to say I've experienced both, and it's helped me now. Like a lot of guys, majority of the world, the basketball world, I've been somewhat of a mentor. The majority of the world isn't first round draft picks, right? And a lot of guys can relate to my story. I had to get it out the mud. I had to really go overseas, figure it out. Um, and I can really help guys that are on that journey, help them make smart decisions. And it feels good to be able to give back in that way for more people.
Chris, I have more listeners who will tell me that they enjoy the people who didn't make it to the league at first, like you who had to play overseas or play in the, whatever G League, whatever it would have been back then, rather than just someone who made it right away because they like the stories of perseverance and what they had to go through to get there. And I think more people can relate to that because most people aren't going to be stars coming, in any aspect of life, whatever career you're in. So I think people can relate to that. And then finally getting there and experiencing your dream. And I'm sure you probably appreciate it a lot more than even some of the guys who got drafted at 20, 21, who might not have fully, grasped what was going on at the time.
For sure. I mean, without those years, I had to learn. I shout out my coach Yves Dufresne all the time. He's the best coach I ever had. My favorite coach was my coach in Germany. He's a Belgian coach. Played with him for 2 seasons. Ended up playing against him in Belgium. That was a good time. But um, to this day, the experiences that I learned from him, especially. I mean, I learned a lot from other coaches as well, but him especially, that prepared me to be able to not only get there but manage. Like the NBA is not easy. Like there's a reason not many people make it, even once you make it. You know what I mean? So um, I was fortunate to have a few years in the league, and it was because I was prepared. So I was prepared for certain moments. I was prepared for the mental part. I knew how to train properly. I knew how to get ready for big games, and a lot of that stuff I learned overseas.
And what was the game play like then in European leagues? Because nowadays I feel like it's definitely more European style in the NBA, obviously, and we have so much European influence. You were kind of in that era where it was just beginning to be like that, but it's still. I mean, Dirk was over here then, and other, but now it's just in the last 10 years it's just blown up, and we have tons of European players who are massively successful in the NBA. What did
Yeah.
you see back then, and did you see this coming?
Yeah. I mean, I put it like this: like the youth programs overseas, like these guys are professionals early. And when I say professionals, it's not only the training regimen; is you're playing against men at an early age, and men are men. You know what I mean? So these kids are able to do it against grown professionals. A lot of us being Americans that are like borderline. Sorry,
Don't worry about it.
a lot of these guys are borderline
He wants to
NBA.
get his say in.
Yeah, he wanted to talk about it. He said, "What about me?" Um, Guys that are borderline professionals, they you got kids that can hold their own, the Lucas of the world, et cetera, et cetera. I think it speaks highly to their talent. A lot of kids, when you're evaluating talent on the collegiate level, you're looking at kids versus kids. You're looking at a kid versus a grown man, and he's doing numbers. Something to be said about what they've learned, and they've been playing it with pros. So there's something to be said about that, and you can kind of do the math there, and yeah, you can see it coming.
And when take us to the process now of you getting into the NBA and how that went. And I remember it's so funny because I remember vividly that Knicks team you were on in 12, 13. I mean, that was a pretty cool team. You had so many guys. And I mean, I think she was in the team, Jay Kidd, obviously Amari and Mello, and I mean J.R. Smith and Shumpert. I mean, a ton of talent in that team. And that was I mean, that was a fun year to watch you guys. And I remember I think you were rookie of the month, if I'm not mistaken, one of those months.
Yeah,
I
the
remember,
last season.
yep,
Yeah,
yep, because I remember
I
you
wasn't
vividly.
really playing too much early on. I had spotty minutes here and there. But yeah, the last month I was part of the regular rotation, and uh, yeah, so I was able to get that award. That was awesome for me. Especially given where I come from, a lot of really sad, dark nights trying to make it, and to get an award from the NBA was a big deal. Still probably one of my proudest moments.
It's incredible. And what did you learn, like playing on that team with all that talent? I mean, Hall of Fame talent everywhere. Give me some guys who taught you a lot of things, and what did they teach you exactly?
Jay Kidd, I remember us, ice tubbing together, talking about body maintenance. I remember Melo talking about certain moves and keeping the game simple. I remember Kurt teaching me about life as an NBA pro. I remember Sheed on my back about defense. Kenyon also on my back about defense, and Camby. I remember him with crazy hazing. I go down the list, man. Like I took something from everybody, bro. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, and I feel terrible about it, but
I mean,
uh,
those are a lot of OGs right there. That's a hell of a
uh,
list you just named.
big time. And I got hazed plenty. I promise you that. There's a lot of stuff online. But I was actually being honest. I was proud of it. When they gave me my Disney backpack, I was like, this is my rite of passage. I was, we seen Shaq. We talking about Shaq earlier. We seen Shaq with the Mickey Mouse ears singing, singing songs and stuff. Everybody's gone through some sort of rookie um rite of passage. So for me, I was honored to be in the NBA and have to go through it.
What was it
From
like playing in front of the New York crowd?
I mean, I'm a Jersey kid originally, so for me, it's if you talk about full circle, I mean, geez, it doesn't get much bigger than Madison Square Garden, so
Mecca. Yep.
to be there, imagine walking in and I'm really in here. The lights are definitely brighter. It's everybody's on the front row. Um, it was for me. I took it as the hugest, a huge honor. It wasn't just like just playing for the Knicks. It was like an honor, like you putting this jersey on as a Jersey kid. It was a big deal.
I mean, think about that. You got to play for your hometown team. I mean, that how many people in life get to say that? And especially the NBA. That's an extremely small number of people.
Pretty rare for sure.
Pretty
Um,
rare.
Pretty rare, and that's for me. I'm a God fearing man, bro, and I noticed my life has been blessed in so many different ways, and you'll see on almost every interview when they ask me my rookie year, I'm like, I'm just blessed to be here, bro. And I still feel that way to this day.
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, I think the gratitude part of it is huge, and and you had to work to get there. So now take us at that playoff run. I know you guys lost, I think, second round to Indiana, and that was they were loaded with obviously PG and David West and those boys and George Hill and Hibbert and all those guys. So what was that like? They were a long, lanky team. I mean, that was a massive team they had.
Yeah, it was tough. He's smiling at you too. I'm keeping him off,
I
but
love it.
he's ecstatic. Come here, bro. Um, yeah, that was a hard fought series. Um, like you said, very long, athletic, tough team. Um, uh, yeah, the team I ended up joining. But Dave West is beast, one of my good friends to this day. Paul's incredible talent. I mean, you go down the line. They were incredibly talented. Hey, get out of here, man.
He wants
uh,
it. He wants his say.
he's
I love-
his time is coming. I'm sure of
If he
it.
when he makes the league someday, I'm pulling this back up, and
Gonna
I'm,
have
I'm
to.
getting credit for his first interview.
Gonna have to. Yeah, save this moment because in my heart of hearts I believe he's gonna make it.
Yes,
I can just tell. And he's giving his side of the story, right?
exactly. He wants to beat his pop someday.
He will be. He'll be better than me for certain. Or I'm not doing my job, right?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that series. I remember that whole era. Obviously, that was the Heatles era, so it was going to be tough for anybody to beat them at that time. But I think you
Yeah,
guys had one of those teams I thought had an outside chance. I mean, you and Indiana are probably the only two teams in the East that had. Boston was kind of fading at that point,
yeah.
with the Big Four. But I think you guys that was a very interesting year, and I think then you go on to play with them, and I that was kind of the end of their runs. I think you guys made it to Eastern Conference Finals that first year you were there, maybe
Second year.
second
Second.
year.
So,
Okay,
so when I went to Indiana, we went to the Eastern Conference Finals and lost to Miami. We lost with the Knicks. We lost to the Pacers in the semis. Um, uh, yeah, but that Knicks team, we won 3 out of 4 games against the Heat that year. So if we would have saw the Heat, I think we had the matchup. We won it. I think we were looking past the Pacers, and we took them lightly, and we paid for it. That's what happened.
and then losing to the Heat the next year with Indiana, what was that like? And what do you think? Because I mean, you guys always Pacers played them tough back in that era. I mean, you guys played them really tough, and I feel like it was a good matchup for you guys at times just because of the size you had.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we matched up well, but I mean, it's LeBron, Chris Bosh, D Wade. Like, it is what it is. Like those guys are, generational talents, all three. And they had great team built around them. They had great balance, great coaching, great management. So it is what it is. We fought hard, and but kudos to those guys.
For sure. Yeah, that was an interesting era. And then tell us about the rest of your career. Like, what did you when you look back at your NBA career? What is your favorite moment, and who is your favorite teammate or two that you had?
My favorite teammate is Shump. That's my guy to this day.
Okay,
Which
let me stop you. We love Shump and Jr. For he came to Cleveland, won a championship here. They are that 12-man roster is beloved here. So anyone, and I talked to Mo Williams actually at camp. I told he was laughing. He's like, yeah, thank you. They're legends here. Like in Cleveland, we hadn't had a championship in 5 decades. So when they won that championship, there's not one person in Cleveland that doesn't know every man on that roster. And if they come here, they get a free drink every time they come here.
I love that. I love that. Rightfully so. I mean, they're champs. They were key figures in that championship.
And what was Shump like? What is he like? Off the court, and what did you guys teach each other?
Big time family man. And it's really cool to see now that I got mine. Like I call him and talk about stuff. We had him on camera not too long ago, and was giving me some nuggets like about when he's gonna. I'm like, well, how do I get him to talk? He said, bro, he's just gonna start talking. Like it's just gonna happen naturally. Just be natural. Talk to him. Giving me little stuff. Family man first. I'll say that about Shump. Loyal, big time. Guy that anytime I need him, if I call and say, yo, I need you. He's the type of dude that'd be there, give you a shirt off his back. Um, Talented. Obviously, he hosts his show. Also an artist, also an actor. He's just a man of many gifts. So that's the type of dude he is. He's a special guy.
Yeah, he seemed like it. We loved his personality here, and that team had a lot of good personality. Jefferson and Fry, and of course LeBron, and you had a ton of guys in that team that had personality. So that was
Absolutely.
a great bunch of guys. But that team is absolutely beloved here. And Shump, I mean, you even say Shump to anybody, and they just people smile. Jr. Shump, LeBron doesn't matter. So that it's
Yeah.
cool that I didn't realize you're that close with them. That's awesome. When you look back now at you played with, I believe, a rookie Giannis or a second year Giannis.
He wasn't a rookie. Yeah, it was 2 or 3, 2 or 3
Okay,
years.
and Chris,
I think, yeah.
could you foresee the superstar he would become back then? Okay, you
Yes.
good.
Any of my friends, they knew. They'll tell you to this day. I was like, yo, there's this kid that nobody knows yet. He's gonna take over the league. And people be like, what? I'm like, bro, he's gonna be one of the goats, bro. Like I used to say this a long time ago, and everybody thought I was crazy. And then they started to see it. I mean, you can see this kid, um, 6'10", 6'11", scrawny, but in his eyes, it was something different, And I played with Melo, I played with PG, I played with, guys that I think are gonna be Hall of Famers, first ballot too. And I'm like, this kid, he just does more. And he's gonna keep growing and he wants to grow. He has all the talent in the world, but he has the work ethic. And for me, not to say that any of those other guys didn't, but none of them are built like Giannis. And
He's
he
a
works
freak.
as hard as anybody.
He's a freaking nature. I remember that game 6 against the Suns. He had 50, and you can just tell
Yeah,
he wasn't losing that game. They just weren't
yeah,
gonna stop him. It was over. Yeah, he
absolutely.
I want to see him get. I want to see those guys get healthy because we didn't get to see it this year. I want to see Boston and Milwaukee and New York now has Mikal Bridges, so that's gonna be fun next year to see what happens with all these teams. But I want to see the Bucks healthy because we didn't get to see him healthy this year with Giannis and Dame and those guys because I think they're gonna be a threat. People are kind of counting them out, but I wouldn't count them out if they're all healthy. So you got Brook.
Absolutely not.
Yep, and so that'll be interesting. When you look back at your career in the NBA, who was the toughest guy to guard?
You know what's crazy? When people ask me that question, I always say J.R. Smith, bro. And I know as my teammate, we play a lot of one-on-ones after practices. And I mean, I actually know JR. We used to hoop a lot back in his Denver days. But I say J.R. Smith, bro. Like playing one-on-one with him, first off, the guy can shoot from anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh
Put the
yeah,
ball on the floor. If you play up too close, he'll take off. He'll get by you and get to the rim. Um, I never hesitate. I always say J.R. Smith was my toughest matchup where I was like, I don't know what to do. I've guarded. People gonna take it as like blasphemy, but I've guarded KD, everybody, and KD is obviously right there. Like he's better than Shump. I mean, better than Jr. But I feel like Jr. for me personally gave me more problems.
Chris Jr. And people forget like when he came in the league, he was super athletic, like crazy athletic, and
Oh yeah,
doing spin dunks and I mean all types of stuff. And he was like 22, 23, and then he kind of blossomed more into that shooter, that almost like a 3-and-D role. And he was a good defender too. So when
yeah,
he was in Cleveland, I mean, when we always said in Cleveland, when him and K Love are hitting their threes, you weren't beating the Cavs. Not with Kyrie and LeBron, you weren't beating them. It just was over.
yeah.
And then you had Shump and all the other guys. It was over. Those
You get as close as you want to Jr. too. He don't see you.
they would come up the court
You
sometimes
get-
and like,
yeah,
oh, they would come up the court and Kyrie or Dellavedova passed it. He would shoot from 25 feet out. And he was, there was a game 1 against the Hawks in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think he hit like 7 or 8 threes. And we didn't even have Kyrie or Love that series. And we just blew those guys out. And they had a good team. We had Teague and Horford and Korver and, Millsap and those guys. And it wasn't even close because JR was hitting his threes. Dellavedova was hitting his threes and LeBron was doing his thing. And yeah, I mean, we saw Jr. I didn't realize how good Jr. was as a shooter until he came to Cleveland. And I'm like, wow, this guy can really shoot. So I don't doubt that one bit. And you're right, he would go by people. He could dunk. He was
super athlete.
yes, he was a super athlete. And he was a strong guy too. I mean, defensively, he was tough. So yeah,
Yeah,
he that we
yeah.
again
If I
that
had to
that
pick a pick right now, that's the guy right there where I'm like, I'd rather not play that one right now.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. You say Jr. Because when we again, if I hadn't seen him, every game in Cleveland, I don't know what. But having seen him, I saw what he was like when he was on. He was on, and you weren't. He was, and that's when the Cavs were unbeatable. So yeah, he was definitely an X factor. He actually had Shumpert had a 4-point play in Game 7 against the Warriors, and then Jr. hit back-to-back threes to start the second half. And those two things we always talk about that because everyone gives obviously Kyrie and LeBron get the love and K Love. But those two guys had big time plays in that Game 7 to win that game. So it was definitely a team effort. But that's cool. I didn't realize that you're that close to those guys. So that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, big time. I salute them both. Great guys.
So what are you doing now? Aren't you a coach or assistant coach for the Herd?
I did last year. I coached in the G League. Yes, I coached the herd. And I helped Milwaukee with some of their pre-draft stuff, some of the preseason stuff too, their vet camp stuff. It was my first year coaching. Very blessed to have that opportunity as well. Um, what am I doing now? I'm not sure if we'll do it again next year. We're still in conversations to figure out what's next, but I'm super thankful to Bano, super thankful to Artie, super thankful to the whole organization for giving me a shot and letting me learn on the job. I think I was able to help a few guys, and it felt really good to get back. Like I said, that's a thing I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, I could just tell when I saw you at camp, a couple weeks ago, how passionate you were, and just it's cool to see the former players come back and help the younger kids. Because I mean, that's a big deal, especially for the mental aspect of it. I think the physical
Yeah.
aspect, yeah, those kids are going to be. I mean, some of those kids are freaks, but when it comes to the mental aspect, like most players tell me, it's 90% of the game, especially the NBA. You got to be mentally prepared.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I'll say on this platform, if there's any one thing I'm be critical about the NBA these days is you need to have more former players on the rosters, like those guys that are like not necessarily going to be heavy rotation guys, but have been around the league. You need that veteran presence. For us to come back to these camps and talk to these kids, I know a lot of those guys appreciate it. A lot of our voice, a lot of our stories. Um, it's good that we get to bond with the young and the next guys to be in the NBA. But the league should have guys, keep older players or keep space for those older players on rosters now. I think there should be one or two. I think two actually per team, because the mental part. And I know I wouldn't have made it my first year without Kurt, without Camby, without Kenyon, without get Jake Kidd, all these guys. I would Amari, without those guys that have been through it that could actually talk about the mental part when I'm having my ups and downs and pull you by your jersey when you need to. I wouldn't have made it my rookie season. So I think a lot of guys are missing that because the young guys it's all young guys and like the blind leading the blind in a lot of situations. So that's if I was to be critical of the NBA, and I love the NBA. I was, as you know, so I was blessed to be there, but I would say that.
And what about if there's one thing you would change about the NBA currently on the court? What would it be?
I'm not one of those though. Like, you know what I mean? Like I like it. I like what the game is. I think the young guys are in a lot of ways, changing the game in the right way. I think I'm not one of those guys like, man, back in my day, you couldn't have played, boy.
Like the
I
old head,
never,
all the old heads, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
everybody's doing that, and I don't like that. I don't like that. I like the young guys. I respect them. I think a lot of them would play in any era. I think the league is figuring out how to let it be more physical again. I think it was a bit soft for a minute, but I think they're allowing defense to come back. So at this moment, I think they're trying to figure out what's okay because I think it was kind of crazy in the old times. Like they used to just clothesline
Oh,
guys to call the defense. Like
insane.
that ain't right either.
Rick Mahorn and Lambier, those guys yeah,
Yeah,
they're just
like
elbowing
respect to
people.
those guys, they paved the way, you know what I mean? But like the game evolves for a reason. It's like, it's supposed to. And I think the league is figuring it out. I think they're doing a good job right now. So I'm not only thing I'm critical of is that, from the mental aspect, if you don't have veteran leadership on your rosters when you're taking those planes and going city to city, you're leading, you're asking the people that need leaders to not have the right leadership, and that light, it's very dangerous in my opinion. So I think you want to have the right guys on these teams.
I think that's such a balanced look at everything because I run that 90s page and obviously I'm a big 90s, 80s guy, but people I get a lot of fans like who message me about things and they assume that I don't like this current era because I run that page and because I'm a big 90s guy. I run that page to celebrate that era, not to say it's better than any other era. I grew up in that era like you, so I love all those players and I'm friends with a lot of those guys, so I just celebrate it. But I absolutely the talent now. I mean, just the ball movement, the 3-point shooting, the spacing, the size of these guys, and the athletic ability. It's incredible. And I'm not saying, I think a lot of guys in this era could play back then. And I think a lot of guys back in that era could play now, if they would have learned how to shoot maybe a 3-point a little bit better. But besides that, we're talking about Dennis Scott. I mean, Dennis Scott would have been ideal for this era just because of his shooting ability. He was 6'8", could shoot from the outside, So you have, I think it goes both ways. And I don't, I did think it like you, it got a little soft for a while. Now it is kind of getting back to how it was before. And like you said, you don't want it to be like a, a wrestling match out there or, like a hockey
Yeah,
match. It's
some of
supposed to be
that was like
basketball.
some of it was a bit much. Hang on 1 second.
Okay.
He's still figuring it out.
That's good. The era he plays in, it'll be, can you imagine the
I
skill
think they'll
20
have it
years from
really
now?
figured out. It'll be physical, but you can still shoot. It'll be
Yep.
really balanced at that stage. I think trying to find this bottle, but yeah. um, man, he's a big kid. He runs through the formula like still figuring this stuff out. Anyway,
Yeah, I love it. This is actually going to be fun for you to watch years from now because you could see him
yeah,
on here.
for sure, for sure. This is gonna be great footage, and I genuinely believe one of these days will be like I know exactly what I'm gonna throw this on and he'll lock in. So, so you gotta put the right thing on TV in a moment. I tried not to do the TV thing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. It's
but
hard though with all these kids with all the technology now. I mean, they grew up with phones at 5 years old.
yeah, you
Crazy.
want him to have a certain level of like, you know what I mean? But we don't do a lot of TV because I want him. I'm like literally crawling on the floor with him all day, and I don't want him to be a TV head, but
No, I mean, like I think back like when we were younger, yeah, we had, video games, Nintendo and Sega and all that stuff. And but I like to be outside more. I wanted to, play basketball, football, baseball with my friends and, run around. You're playing in the sandbox, whatever you're doing as a kid, like play with the trucks like that. I loved all that stuff. So I think this era, I feel a lot of the kids now, unfortunately, are stuck on their iPads all day inside and, 80 degrees out and they're inside. And yeah, it's just not, I
yeah,
don't think it's just not healthy for their development. I think they need to, and I understand all their friends are doing the same thing, but you hope that they start getting out a little bit more because you got to be outside. I mean, it's just not good for the brain development to constantly be looking at a TV or a screen all day.
100%. And that's the program, we got him on like right now. Um, I only cut the TV on like if we just need a moment type situation, but I don't want him to just drown in TV. You know what I mean? But this particular show, like Spanish Liz, shout out to her. I never met her, nothing like that, but he just loves her, and I got it on TV, and he's locked in right now.
I
So
love it. Well, I only have another question left for you, so we can get
sure.
back to watching them. But um, when you look back at your career, and I asked this to every player that's been on the show, 30 years from now, you're sitting on some beach, retired somewhere. When you look back at your whole life and your career, what do you want people to know about the legacy of Chris Copeland?
Great question. Um, uh, that I was resilient. If you look at my path, I'm a guy that figured out how to. My mom, since a young and she always said, "Find a way or make a way," and I think that embodied my career. I always wanted to make it to the NBA, and when people look back, I want them to see a guy that, when they told him no, he just kept going and kept figuring it out and fought his way to finally get in there. And when he got in there, he did all right, and I'm all right with that as my legacy.
Chris, I think resilience is probably one of the most underrated traits of any successful person. I mean, because you're going to have bumps along the way. And if you can't overcome those or at least find a way around them, you're going to have problems. And a lot of people just end up quitting too early or don't try something because they're afraid of those bumps. But having that resilience, I mean, I've learned that over my career. Just you have to have resilience. And that's a huge aspect of everything. But people don't really talk about that as much. So that's a big part of
Appreciate
it.
that.
And you went through it. You literally went through it and proved that.
I genuinely appreciate that, and that for me, hopefully it'll carry me in Act Two because we got some new things coming, and it's exciting times again.
Yep.
You'll
I
see.
think that's awesome. Well, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. And, it was just cool to hear your story. And when we talked to camp, I knew I wanted to get you on right away because I'm like, I knew about I didn't know all about the overseas part of it, but I knew, of course, your NBA career and a little bit about your college career. So it was just cool to hear all the different stories and, how you went from where you did to make it to the NBA. And that's a pretty awesome story. And the play on the teams you did to have rookie of the month. I mean, those are experiences that most people will never have. And I think it's important for people to learn from guys like you, especially the young kids coming up, to learn about the perseverance, about the hard work, about not giving up. It's a big deal. And then about the mental side of the game and being prepared and, keeping your body a certain way. So I just think that that's all so important to these young kids coming up.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad to be here for them. Guys, a lot of guys know me out here. Like, I try to be a resource for as many people as possible. And I'm an ear whenever guys hit my DM and like, hey, bro, I got a question. If it's respectful or whatever, like I try to respond to everybody, being honest. So it's I feel like it was a gift from God, and I got to be a steward of that gift and try to do the right thing. So, um, I'm honored to be able to say I can give back with experience of some success.
Well, Chris, man, thanks again for doing this. And, awesome story. I'll be in touch for sure, and I'll let you know when this airs. But again, thank you so much. And tell a little man I said hello too.
I will. I will. You'll be seeing him soon, I bet.
Exactly. All right. All right. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.